Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Today's lesson is all about grid drawing, and I'm going to be sharing with you my 10 top tips for grid drawing success. This lesson is in two parts. Part 1 is grid construction, where I'll be showing you how to construct a drawing grid. We'll be drawing one grid on the reference photograph and another grid in our sketch pad. In part 2, grid drawing, I'll be sharing with you my top tips for the actual drawing process. So why use a drawing grid? A drawing grid is used to recreate or transfer an image from one surface to another. In this demonstration, we'll be using an A4 reference image and an A4 drawing sketchpad surface. Grid method can also be used to increase, scale up, or decrease, scale down an image by simply adjusting the scale size of the drawing surface accordingly. Okay, so let's get started. So obviously you're going to need a reference photograph, a sketch pad, a ruler. I'll be using a ruler which is 2.5 centimeters in diameter, a red pen and a charcoal pencil. However, for the grid that we're going to be creating on the drawing surface, ideally you would use a 3H pencil. Most of us don't have one, so a HB pencil will suffice. Of course, keep the pressure very light. Top tip 1. Create a large grid on the reference picture. Here is our reference picture, so all we need to do is place the ruler at the top of the image, mark the line and literally work down the page. When you get to the bottom, turn the ruler vertically and repeat the process. By doing this, you will have a 2.5 square grid on your reference material. Then you simply duplicate the process onto your drawing surface. From there, you can start to draw and simply transfer the images across. I'm going to show you a slightly different way. This is how I approach a grid drawing. I'm going to start with the ruler at the top of the page. Then we're just going to mark where that line would be. I'm going to move the ruler down and then we're going to draw a line. So we're going to mark, and then we're going to draw a line, and we're going to repeat this process to the bottom of the page. Now let's turn the ruler vertically and repeat the process. Now there is a reason why I grid out in such a way, and that's because as you're doing this, it's a real opportunity to familiarize yourself with the subject matter that you're drawing. So by making yourself large squares to start with in your grid, and then adding some smaller squares in the places only where you need them, you're actually engaging yourself more with the image, with the shapes that you're drawing, and I believe it makes for more of a successful result at the end. But you can do whichever way you're comfortable with. Which brings us to top tip 2. Duplicate your large grid onto the drawing surface. Exactly the same process that you did for the reference photograph, but now you're doing it on your actual drawing surface, so that we end up with a grid made up of 5 centimeter squares. Now if we look at the reference image, we can see that some of the squares, the 5 centimeter squares, don't have a great deal of detail in them anyway. Whereas some areas of the drawing, like the face here, we really could use some help here, some guidance with being able to plant these shapes, this eye, this nose. Top tip 3. Introduce smaller grids for detailed areas on reference. So we're working again with the reference photograph, and here on the face we can see we're going to need more guidance. Let's put a guideline in here, and we can see that this is going to help us plant the nose. Now to help us with the eye, if we place another smaller grid within the larger grid, we can see how that's going to help us place the eye, the corner of the mouth. And so at this point you want to work your way around your image and put some extra grids, some smaller grids in the areas where you think that they should go. Like here, for example, let's put another smaller grid in here to help us place this eyebrow. And this will also help us position the eye. I'm starting at the top here so that we can position the hair as we come down, and we can align that beard nicely as well. Now over here we're going to need a fair bit of help here, I think, with the hands. So by putting it a line from top to bottom here, this is going to allow us to place the back of the head, the angle of the neck, this will help us with, and of course the positioning of the hands and the fingers. Let's put half a grid in here to help us position this ear. In this way, we are familiarizing ourselves with the image much more by doing this method than we would be if we just literally drew the grid without paying much attention. If we look at these two squares here where the hands are, there's not a lot going on, but by just putting in one grid line here, that will help us place that thumb. And this line will help us place the fingers. So once you're happy with your smaller grids, then we can move on to top tip 4. Duplicate smaller grids onto your drawing surface. So to help you place the smaller grids within the larger grids, you can refer to the reference photograph. Make sure that you get them all in the right place, and go ahead and put all the smaller grid lines in place. And now we're ready for top tip 5, which is to add colour to your reference picture grid lines. Now, the reason I do this is because when you're just working with a pencil on the grid lines, sometimes the lines can get lost. In particular, if you're working with a pencil drawing and you're coming to a very detailed area in the work, you can sometimes get confused with what is line and what is the grid guidance line. And so by putting on top of the charcoal line a nice bright colour, this will stop any confusion. I like to use red because it is bright, you can easily see it. Yellow doesn't work all that well. You can't see yellow from certain angles. Of course, only do this if you're not precious about the reference photograph. If it's a photocopy like mine is today, it's no big drama. But if it was a photograph that you were wanting to keep, then clearly you wouldn't be doing this. So here we are in part 2 for the grid drawing itself, my personal favourite part. So let's get straight to it. So our grid drawing top tip 1, place the large shapes on the drawing surface. The way I approach a drawing, whether I'm working from a grid or not, is usually the same. I start by mapping out all the large shapes within the work. If you're an absolute beginner to drawing, just go with the traditional grid method of transferring this image. So you go from square to square, simply transferring everything that you see within that square onto your drawing surface. However, if you're familiar with drawing, if it's something you've done a little bit of and you're feeling a little bit more confident, then I would definitely suggest you try mapping out the big shapes within the work before you get caught up in any detail at all. This is always good practice with any drawing, regardless of technique and regardless of subject matter. Top tip 2, start to place the shaded areas. So now we're referring to the reference photograph, and wherever we see shaded areas, we're simply just going to place those on our drawing surface. And you can go square by square and do this, and you just work around the image, loosely placing wherever you think those darker areas would be. And you start building these darks up at this stage in the drawing, working all around the drawing. And this is why I prefer this method a lot more, because it stops you from getting caught up in one specific area of the drawing, which can quite often be the outcome with grid drawing. You can get so consumed with one little area. And so that's why this method enables you to work the whole drawing more, working around the drawing. Top tip 3, commit to line placement. So it's at this part of the drawing where we can start to commit ourselves a little bit more. We're happy with things at position, so let's go ahead and commit some quite strong lines in here. And remembering that we're using charcoal pencil, so marks will not be all that easy to remove. And that's why we'll leave them to the commitment stage. So don't worry too much if you do get something in the wrong place and you have to move it. You will be left with a shadow line. But shadow lines can quite often add a lot of interest to a drawing. Top tip 4, start building up the form. So it's at this stage in the drawing when we can start to add three-dimensional qualities, introducing more gradual tones, making sure that we have a good variety of tonal graduations. We've kept the lightest of the lights, we've allowed the paper to come through. We shall be introducing some more darks to give the work more contrast. This is actually a soft charcoal pencil. Of course, charcoal pencils are graded from extra soft, soft, medium, hard. So at this stage, we're going to get the hands in place. Now I would have normally put these in. I like to keep the drawing normally all at the same stage throughout the drawing. But because we're working a lot with the face and the hands are at the bottom of the picture frame, then I didn't want to continuously work on top of those hands. So that's why I've left them until this stage. So let me go ahead and quickly place them and add a little bit of form to them. And now I'll go ahead and place these two hands in here right at the bottom of the page. Now I'm using the reference image here, glancing at the reference image, transferring that information to the drawing surface and repeating that process. The same principle as what we did with the face, so it's getting the big shapes down, introducing some tonal value. Start to commit ourselves to line placement, adding more darks, building up the form. So once we've got both hands placed, we can go ahead and create some form. Building up our tonal graduation. Top tip 5. Add details to refine your drawing. So it's at this stage in the drawing we stop and we reflect on the drawing, and then we refine the drawing with any highlights, lowlights. We can tidy the work up with an eraser. We can certainly remove the grid lines at this stage. And I think we've achieved what we needed to do here. I think we've got a reasonably good interpretation. I think we've created a reasonably good study of this study. Well, thank you for watching today. I hope you've learned something from this video, and I hope you've liked the video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot with the algorithms on YouTube. And leave me a comment should you wish. If you have any suggestions for anything you'd like me to draw, please leave your suggestions in the comments below. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Uploads weekly. And don't forget to click notifications so you don't miss future uploads.